session to order. The time is 5:07 p.m. Mr. Newman is absent right now. I'm sure he'll be coming. And Mr. Winters isn't here yet either. So we'd like to start it with Amanda Nothaft. Did I say that correctly? Nothaft? Amanda from University of Michigan Poverty Solutions, I think is it. And we're going to review the Opportunity Index presentation.
Can I use this mic? Great. So,
John Newman's here.
okay, sorry.
So the microphone voice activated, so you got to get kind of,
Okay.
there you go, Amanda.
There you go. So we're getting my slides figured out. My RA, I think, added a bunch of animations unintentionally. I was like, can you clean this up? Yeah, this isn't.
Do you want to, while she's working on that, did you wave me? Waving at me? We can talk about Juneteenth fireworks if y'all want to. While we're waiting for Amanda. Attention, board. No one listens to me, Amanda, no. On the work session, we put on here, and Juneteenth was June 19th was made a holiday last year, and we had our first event here in a flag-raising ceremony. So one young man approached us to have fireworks on that day, and our ordinance prohibited it. So by adding Juneteenth, the day before, the day of, and the day after, like we do every other holiday, we need to get, I don't know, not buy-in, that's not a good word, but we need to know if the board's supportive in amending the ordinance and including the fireworks on June 19th as part of it. So this is just a work session agenda, and I think I know, but I would like to hear from the board before we put it right on the agenda. So, does anyone have any comments on that? Or?
When I hear you ask the question, or when you were explaining it right now, is it to have fireworks here, or is it just to allow fireworks to happen in the township?
We have them limited in the township. State law allows them every day, and we limited them to the national holidays, and this date has been added as a national holiday, designated.
But the individual wasn't asking us to host them or do it.
No.
Allow it to happen within the township.
Yeah, it's to amend the ordinance just to allow them to have fireworks. And during that last year, I had 2 or 3 people contact me in our neighborhood too, and they didn't want to get in trouble because it's not a designated day, but so if we designate it, then we don't have to worry about it. And typically our residents, don't like fireworks, our animals don't like fireworks, and neither do our veterans, but so in order to add this date as a holiday, then we have to do an ordinance amendment, and the attorney can prepare one and bring it back at the next meeting, which would still give us time in order to have it, the ordinance adopted by June.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would just like to say that I support this idea and bringing it back to the next board meeting or whenever Attorney Winters is able to help, draft the ordinance language. And thank you for your leadership on that and recognizing such an important day.
Are there any objections to bringing this back to the next meeting? Or hopefully next meeting? I think we can do it. I know we can.
Microphone close to it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just had a question, actually. First off, I'm definitely supportive of this. I think we vaguely touched on it last year during our event that we had here. A lot of folks were wanting to know that. So I think it'll be good. My only question is day before and day after, in the middle of the week, I don't know if we're allowed to put that kind of, I don't know if that, I guess I want to put like a restriction a little, just the day of, unless it's the weekend, then maybe it'd be okay. But I don't know how that looks as far as language. I don't think we need to add that many more days in the middle of a work week, but we should allow that day.
Okay.
But I would imagine that on the weekend, I could see it being a day before, day after. But I don't know how that looks as far as how to write that up and if the board agrees with that or not. So
Okay.
that was just my only comments and
Yeah.
concerns.
And that's why we had it on the work session. And please, John.
I think if like Trustee Wilson was saying, I think if we could just restrict it to one day, if it's in the week, make the language to where, if it's a weekend, that's fine, but it's like a Wednesday, not Tuesday or Thursday, as long as it's just for that day.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Is there anyone else?
Go ahead, Gloria.
Yeah, just shortly, I just also agree, I'm in support of the fireworks ordinance to be included in the Juneteenth celebration. And I also agree it should be for that day, that particular day. Because I think if you linger, like sometimes they do it for the 4th of July, it goes all week sometimes. But if you specify that particular date, I think that would be great. In the ordinance.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, my follow-up comment was just that I could agree with that also, and I would just want this language to be reflective and equal to all of the other holidays. So I'm thinking of like 4th of July. So if our ordinance now allows for the days surrounding, we should, amend that to be consistent with this one.
Yeah, if you're consistent with the other holidays that we've designated, it's the day before, the day of, and the day after. So that
Oh, okay. So,
treats it equally. A lot of people really could learn more about Juneteenth, and it's a real opportunity to educate and inform.
so Madam Chair, you're saying the 4th of July, they could do it the day before, the day of, and day after?
That's what we can currently do for all the other designated holidays that we have.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's
Well,
up to the board.
well-
I'll do whatever the board,
But I think it's fair if you treat the other ones and it's in the ordinance like that. I think we had to be fair across the board. I just thought the 4th of July was just for the 4th of July. I always see them do them, day after or whatever, but I didn't know it was actually in the ordinance.
Yes.
That they could do it. So I think fair across the board, it should be fair. Should be the same.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now that it's been explained, not only keeping it consistent with the other holidays, but also the education piece. Maybe people will be more aware
Yeah,
Right.
of the history.
Okay, so
yeah, I agree also.
if everyone's in agreement, we'll bring back to amend the ordinance for the day before, the day of, and the day after June 19th. Okay. Amanda, are you ready? No? Did Amanda say no?
I said no.
All right. Well, let me see if I can cover anything up. Well, we have public comments coming up. So, we'll just review the agenda then, and why Amanda is working. Are there any public comments at this time?
You want me to come forward now, or wait?
You can go to the microphone and give your name and address.
Isn't now a good time?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, yeah. So my name is Jason Silva. I represent the company ShotSpotter. I've been in talks now with the township for probably a little over a year or so. And I actually came out here to meet with Lieutenant Peltier and Stan Eldridge here to talk about potentially bringing ShotSpotter to the city. So I want to take this opportunity. Stan invited me to introduce myself to the council, and I'm here. It's kind of really impromptu, so I know if anybody's familiar with our technology or what we do, I'm here to answer any questions you might have, any concerns you might have, or anything like that, and open up the floor to that.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they know what ShotSpotter is. Can you give
okay.
a 2-minute?
Yeah, absolutely. So for ShotSpotter, we are a gunshot detection company. We work with law enforcement. It's actually a system that I used in the city of Richmond, California, when I was a police officer. So what we do is in under 60 seconds, we will multilaterate if a gunshot goes off within your designated coverage area, and we send this information to your police officers, like I said, in under 60 seconds, where they're going to get the time, the location, the nearest address of where the incident occurred at. You're also going to be notified if it's a multiple shooter incident. We'll let you know if it's a high capacity firearm that was used, if it is a fully automatic firearm that was used. In these alerts that we send your police officers straight to their cell phones, to their MDTs, to their tablets. Also within that information, you're going to have what's called an incident lead summary. This lead summary helps your officers and detectives there on the scene break down the incident that happened. We provide you the timestamp all the way down to the millisecond of each shot that was fired. We also will provide you with the exact location and sequence the shots were fired in as well. And we send all this information to your officers in under 60 seconds. We've been in business now for, oh, yes, ma'am. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. Oh, please let me know if I don't have clock up right now. And the company has been in business for over 25 years. We have currently over 120 cities across the United States that use our technology. So if you do have any questions about how it might be used, I'm here to answer them.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Amanda, you're still not ready? Okay, that's okay, honey. We'll keep going. Mr. Newman, did you have a question?
Name is Shot Spotter.
Yeah, so we had met with the Sheriff's Department in regards to two technologies. One was LPR reader, which is license plate reader, and the other one that was brought forth was what's called Shot Spotter.
Okay.
But we do have a policy from the Sheriff's Department on the license plate readers. But, we haven't even brought anything to the board yet because whether it goes through the Sheriff's Department or if it goes through the Township Board, one, we would talk about it first. And secondly, there would be community engagement and then before we voted on it. So, and Shot Spotters is another technology that was discussed. But we don't have, we're doing license plate readers first.
John, Jason was just in town today, so he flew all the way in from Colorado, so I thought he could at least introduce himself.
Okay.
City of Detroit uses this, as well as Chicago and many other cities, big and small, around the country. So it's just something the sheriff's office asked us to look at. We're way down the road yet still.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah,
But-
just
Yeah,
wanted to know more about it.
thank you.
Yeah.
So is there anything, I saw Kirk Prophet walked in, so maybe we can go back to the legislative update to the board. Kirk, would you like to, we're having some technical difficulties, and it's going to be really bad if I have to go down there and fix it. That means they're in bad shape if I'm helping, but would you like to give an update?
Sure. Come up here, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. She attached it to.
Should I take this off? Should I leave it on or take it off so you can hear better? Like that? Okay. All right, great, thanks. Well, thank you. It's been a while since I've been here, and it's good to be back. I think the first time I was here, just thinking back, was way back when I worked with the sheriff, and we were talking then about police contracts. The township was considering its own police force. Ron Allen was the supervisor, and a lot of water under the bridge since then. But at any rate, it's good to be back. So let me kind of give you the lay of the land. I thought I'd offer some comments about what's going on in Lansing, and then see if there's some give and take or if there's any questions or issues. A lot of different variables feeding into what's going on in Lansing right now. Obviously, COVID has been around for 2 years now, and it continues to have a huge impact on all the dialogue and the different activities going on in Lansing. The state is awash in money. It's just incredible. It's not, again, I mentioned I was here, 40 or so years ago for the first time. This isn't once in a lifetime. This is once and forever in terms of the amount of money the state has. It's just astounding. The governor offered her budget recommendations last week, February 9th. And it's a general fund budget recommendation of $14.3 billion. It was under Granholm during the recession, it was $7 billion, to give it a little perspective. Now, when I left office 20 years ago or 25 years ago, it was right around $10 billion, but at that point in time, our revenue structure was very different. In fact, we were pretty healthy financially at that time. Since then, there's been dramatic cuts in the business tax, dramatic cuts in other revenue structures over the time, and it hasn't even got back close to $10 billion until just recently, and now this year, just on state revenues. There's a governor's budget recommendation of a $14 billion general fund. That's in addition to all the other surplus money, federal money, additional state revenues that came in unexpected last year. Literally, as we came into 2022, there were there was close to $20 billion on the state's balance sheet. Unspent, unidentified, or unearmarked, some of it, or a lot of it's restricted. A lot of it's federal money. Some of it has to go to COVID. Some of it has to go for other things. But $20 billion on the state's balance sheet. I mean, typically, if the state has like maybe 100 million or 50 million on its balance sheet, that is a good day. They have 20 billion. It's just staggering. And to the credit of your leadership, and to be honest, Representative Ronnie Peterson especially, and some others, we're really looking deep to see what we can do to bring some of that home. A lot of things feeding into the challenge there. Like I mentioned, though, there's, we've got reapportioned districts that are causing a lot of primaries and a lot of turmoil among legislators themselves about who's going to run, where they're going to run. The districts are dramatically different. Indeed, in this county, they're very different again. As you know, Ronnie's district kind of runs north and south on the east side of the county from Ypsilanti Township up to Salem. The new district, of course, as you know, in this area is just Ypsilanti Township, a little bit of Superior. And you look at the map of how it was drawn in this area, there's close to 5 or 6 districts that touch a piece of Ann Arbor. Then the 2 Senate districts, currently it's a north-south line that divides the Senate districts in this area. It's now an east-west district. That again, all this stuff creates opportunities on the east side of the county for new representation, for expanded representation if we choose. All kinds of things that I think, again, to the credit of all you folks who choose to be elected in very difficult times. I mean, sometimes I don't know how you guys do it with social media and very, sometimes combative constituency. I think you guys are pretty fortunate because you've always been so welcoming to your constituencies to come before you like this. The township hall is open. You can walk in and see your elected leadership anytime you want. So I think yours is probably a little different, but in so many places where they don't have quite that same opportunity for relationship and connection, the social media is just really difficult on a lot of these folks, as is the constituencies in general, kind of the culture in America right now. So I give a lot of you, or all of you, credit for choosing to be elected and choosing to be as accessible as you are. But you got all that feeding into the process in Lansing, the reapportioned districts. Term limits, of course. You look at what happens in this year in term limits in the state legislature. In the Senate, Senate Majority Leader will leave for term limits. The Chair of Appropriations will leave for term limits. In the House, the Speaker of the House will leave for term limits. The Chair of Appropriations will leave for term limits. That's the 4 top leadership positions in the House and Senate. It's a challenge in terms of transition, but every time there's a challenge, there's opportunities. Both the House and Senate are probably up for grabs. The last time the Senate, in terms of control, was under a Democratic majority was the first year I went to Lansing in 1983, 82. At that moment in time, there was a budget problem, and the Governor Blanchard, together with the legislature, did a 38% temporary income tax increase to solve the budget problem. Senate Minority Leader John Engler recalled 2 senators, took control of the Senate, and they haven't given it up for the last 38, 40 years. I don't think anybody expected it at the time, but it's been Republican control in the Senate literally for the last 38 to 40 years. House has gone back and forth a little bit. It stayed pretty much Democrat for most of that, the 90s, 80s, when I was there. And then in the 2000s, the Republicans took control for a brief moment under Governor Granholm. The Democrats had control in the House, but for most of the last 20 years, it's been Republican control in the House. So this is a moment in time where there are opportunities for transition, for change. And it's certainly a time to be engaged, and I give you all credit for doing so. But all that feeds into, with all this money on the table, it feeds into a lot of challenge with how it's going to be spent, when it's going to be spent. As you probably know, every year the governor or the government has to do a budget by the end of September, 1st of October. So the budget process is kind of like over through the fall. Departments prepare their budget recommendations. The governor gives her budget recommendation based on that, which she did just last week. The legislature now will look at those recommendations and deliberate over them between now and June. Probably in June or July, they'll finish their deliberations, send a budget to the governor, and hopefully for a signing by the governor in plenty of time so that the elections can take their course and the budget can be in place. But all that stuff feeds into it. Probably the top priorities, I think you probably saw last week from the governor, are infrastructure, education, water, healthcare, economic development, as the budget kind of played out. For the township, I think there's some good news. Finally, although they got plenty of money, they could probably do more. But for the township, they're finally doing a much better job with statutory revenue sharing. For anybody listening if it's on the web or if it's recorded or whatever, as most people know, the revenue sources for the township for most local governments are revenue sharing and property tax. Your property tax has been dramatically diminished or limited by Prop A and Headley, the way they work together. So that revenue source isn't what it always was. And then on top of that, the state has failed in its promise of revenue sharing for the last 20 or 30 years. So your challenge, when people bark at, bring me in any time, when people are barking at you guys about the money or what you can or cannot do, I love to come into groups like this and make sure that the public knows whatever financial challenge that this township has or any local government has, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. This is a problem the state created, and at this moment in time, when they're awash in money, they're going to do a better job, but it's not nearly probably what they could do. They're going to do 5% in the base and 5% one time for statutory revenue sharing, which is nice. It's much better than the cuts or the elimination. Governor Engler, indeed, at one moment in time in the early 2000s, vetoed the entire revenue sharing budget. And we had to work to restore it. And the respect for local government, as most of you folks know who have to do this every day, from state government is just not where it should be. I mean, you guys are hands-on. You guys are doing this stuff every day for your constituents. And the respect that you get from state government isn't nearly what it should be, and it's always reflected in this budget. So the revenue sharing piece should be better. It could be a lot better, but it should be better regardless. Just look through a few notes here. Locally, other things that matter, I think, to us that I think you want to be aware of. The community college is going to get the same 5% on their base and 5% one time, which is good. We draw on the community college. They're trying to do some things, I know, on this side, especially of the county with talent development and that sort of thing. So that helps there. I really appreciate the presence and the work that President Blanca and her whole team try to do on the east side. Eastern Michigan, the same thing. They have a little more of a challenge in the context of enrollment. But they're going to get 5% in the base and 5% across one time in the governor's recommendation, which helps. Again, in the context of Eastern Michigan, the only sources for revenue they basically have are tuition and state aid. So when the state fails, as it has for the last 20 or 25 years, to fund higher ed properly, the four-year schools, students see it in the form of higher tuition, and that typically translates into more student debt, which impacts so many things that we'd all like to achieve. Maybe just a couple thoughts on a few projects locally, and then, Madam Supervisor, if it makes sense, we could have some give and take. I know those are pretty general comments. We can try to get into some other things if it makes sense for you. And when I look at Brendan, Heather, and Stan, especially because I see you folks a little more, the leader, the full-time leaders. You know this, but they've been immersed in trying for years to bring Willow Run to the economic development asset that it should be. We're a little concerned more recently, to be honest, that a lot of the activity from Wayne County Airport Authority is moving the center of the airport, if you will, to the east side. we have some opportunities, but some challenges on the west side as a result. I would want to mention especially Ypsilanti Township, that Connie Coletta and his team there are just killing it. And they love the township. They love the red carpet that you guys have rolled out for them for years. There's probably no better friend to Connie than Brenda, because she's been here a little longer than some. He might even like Doug a little bit. I'm not sure about that, but I suppose he does. But just to reinforce that a little bit, to know who we have in our midst here, because I think we need to be really proud of some of these special employers that we have. Connie, as some of you know, but just to repeat it, Connie, with his nephew Doug and some of their activities, now have close to 30, I think it's 30 747s in international worldwide shipping. Just incredible. They were huge participants in trying to make sure that nationally and locally here we had PPE 2 years ago, and they were making all kinds of efforts and offers to help make sure that we were responsive to that. They continue to be massively engaged in humanitarian aid all across the country or all across the world. Probably more interestingly, in a military context, they are the exclusive shipper of mail to the troops in the Middle East. Additionally, with Doug and some of his activities, I'm not sure if he's exclusive, but he's one of the few, perhaps exclusive, carrier of fallen soldiers back from the Middle East. These are special people we have working right here in our community, and they love our community, and they love this township because, in contrast with a lot of other governments they work with, this township is responsive whenever they call. Brenda and the team respond. I mean, it is so refreshing to see, public officials who are getting beaten up by so many different people. They drop it when Connie calls, says, I got to have ABC, XYZ, and he's actually not even in Ypsi Township. He's a little bit in Van Buren Township. But this township has always rolled out the red carpet, so we're very appreciative. We're trying to do some things with Hangar 1 there. Looking at Wayne County Airport Authority actually would like to bring, as one of the major entryways to the airport, a more improved exit off of Rawsonville Road directly into the airport. Part of what we're doing in that context is, okay, fine, but make sure it comes west as much as it goes east, so that we get the benefit of that enhanced entry and exit from I-94. A couple other things maybe, and again, special thanks especially to Representative Peterson for the work he's done with the township and with the city to, literally and figuratively build that bridge between the city and the township across Whitaker Road. For years, it's been, I've ridden my bike across there a number of times, and you can do it, but you got to be pretty good. If you're a pedestrian trying to go from the city to the township or township to the city across Whitaker, Huron Street, you got to be pretty good. The pedestrian movements that are going to be now possible because of what Brendan, the leadership team, and in fairness, the mayor in Ypsi and their leadership team together with MDOT and this whole group. It's complicated when you got this many different governments involved, MDOT and the county and all these folks. Putting all that together, Representative Peterson, after all these years of having that exit there, he did it. And we're going to have it. And it shows what a huge difference it can be when you have that kind of leadership in those kind of positions. Similarly, again, I don't want to make this a total Ronnie Peterson love fest, but the guys, this is his last year, and he made these 6 years count. You look at what's going on now, they're just about complete with US 12. And I think, I don't know how many times we've talked about the lighting challenge out there and the need for improvements on US 12. And that is about to be completed. Actually, I called MDOT and Ronnie earlier today. We're having some conversations about some more. And the next opportunities we like to do in the next 10 months before he leaves. And that one is actually coming in under budget. How about that for a government? And they're going to have a little bit left over. They're going to try to see what else they could do yet out there. So that's pretty cool. We're always, one of the main things we've had through this area for years that has never been fully appreciated, I don't think, but I think we continue to explore better ways to do it is the Huron River and in our community, Ford Lake. Little credit to the CVB, to Eastern Michigan, to Brenda and a bunch of folks, as we're looking at better ways to use Ford Lake, especially perhaps in the context of a rowing course. In anything we do there, and I give, again, the credit to the township, because the township, I think, will only pursue, projects like that if they can find that delicate space where it works for, an enhancement to the lake, it works for the people that live there, it works for all these different interests that come, it works environmentally, all those kind of things that come into play on a project like that. If that delicate space can be found, then the township will proceed forward. If that delicate space isn't found, I'm sure they'll deal with it in other ways. So, again, it's a real credit to an elected leadership that listens to their constituency. Let's see. Just maybe a quick update on ACM. Again, the township, when I was elected, we had 30,000 plus UAW workers in my district. Today, maybe 1,000? I don't know. But all that property out there that had to be addressed where there used to be, incredible economic activity, the township leadership again stepped up a few years back and found a way to clear it and make it available for development. ACM, of course, went in there. ACM hasn't quite achieved, I would say, what we might have hoped for, but it's working. And they've actually formed some partnerships with EMU, with Keith Stone and some of that activity. And they continue to try to do what I think was anticipated when it was put there. I think we're going to get there. It was a little slower than a lot of us might have expected, but I think we're going to get there based on this collaboration that's going on between the township, EMU, ACM, the state, and others. Let's see. Just a couple other things. Well, let me stop there. I probably should mention Grove Road because, that has been an ongoing challenge. And finally, again, pedestrian movements across Grove Road can be safely navigated. So congratulations on that. Let me stop there, Madam Supervisor, see if there's comments. Yeah.
I did not pay him either. Does any board members have any questions or comments about what's going on in Lansing?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Trustee
Yeah, I
Wilson.
just wanted to kind of repeat what I had mentioned a few weeks ago to the board when we renewed our contract with GCSI, that it's definitely money well spent. I think you give us a lot of updates through email and your team as well, so we're just appreciative of the hard work you're doing for us.
Thank you. I mean, it's when I left office, which is a while back, I don't mean to be too historical, but, I have the great fortune of, even though I'm not elected anymore for quite a while now, I get to work for the community I grew up in, which is pretty cool. It's pretty special. And I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have one.
Mr. Newman.
Yes. I understand that there's a work being done as far as the people being taxed from Willow Run, paying a high amount of tax for a school that doesn't exist, high amount of debt. Yeah, for a school that doesn't exist. Is there any movement on that, or?
Yeah, I'll, I'm getting old, so I'll just say what I think. I've been immersed, when the merger came together, when that was explored, the ISD came to me and asked for my support. I said no. I thought it would segregate, certainly on an economic basis, probably on a racially basis. And I think it has. The school district's now 85% non-white in a community it doesn't reflect the community. And if it was just segregated racially or economically, that's probably not good, but it's segregated with significantly diminished opportunity in the school, which is so unfair. We treat that school district as a region in ways that I don't think we would allow anywhere else in this community. It really bothers me, we've taken it to the Civil Rights Commission, we've taken it to the county, we've taken it to the ISD, and we're not going to stop until we can get better attention until we can shine a brighter light on what's going on for these kids who just want the chance every other kid has. It's so unfair. As a way for me to say a little bit about my passion more recently, so thank you for the opportunity. Now, on the tax issue, yeah, it's so unfair. I mean, yeah, you're paying tax on building. Here all these buildings were constructed, went to the voters, and they supported their districts, supported the kids and everything. And now the buildings aren't used, and primarily because this district that was created by the government outside of here, but created by a government outside of here, said, hey, you're going to love this, this is going to be good for you. Well, fine. Now we got a tax burden that doesn't make any sense, and we got opportunity for the kids that is so unfair and disparate to what it is elsewhere in this region. I mean, in terms of the general education in Ypsi schools, there's not one AP class offered. I mean, come on. When we started a little student development program there, as some of you know, when we started through the football program, and we started there because we thought we could exploit and leverage the football interest into some performance that matters: graduation, good citizenship, healthy lifestyle, post-secondary engagement, a belief that the kids actually matter in themselves, some things like that. But we moved beyond that. But what became crystal clear is it's just so different for the experience that they get. When we in the football piece, for example, we got this field that was full of weeds and ruts, and if you cut on the good side of a hole, you got a great cut. But if you cut on the wrong side, you break your ankle. That's where we told these kids they got to play. You go to Saline, and I don't begrudge Saline for having incredible resources, but we're playing against a team with 4 artificial turf fields and video boards. I mean, come on, and you can see it in the kids' eyes when you see them. Oh, I get it. And people kind of bristle sometimes when you use these kind of words, but maybe I don't matter as much. And, it's really sad to be telling kids at that age. It plays out, obviously, back to your point, I just can't resist getting, and it wasn't a plan. I didn't tell them to ask me this. But,
I knew it would come up.
But yeah, on the tax issue, it's got to be addressed because it's so unfair to those homeowners, those taxpayers. They're paying for something that doesn't exist. And it wasn't their fault. They were trying to support their kids, and you get these outsiders come and say, hey, we're going to give you this school. They didn't address the debt. Now, at this moment in time, this is a perfect moment in time to address that debt burden on the school district. Elena and the whole team over there, the superintendent, they are restricted for what they can do because of that debt burden that they inherited. This is a time, when I mentioned $20 billion, and they're spending some of it, but they don't have 50 million or whatever the number is to get rid of that debt.
You can't use it for debt, though, I don't think.
Right.
The ARPA fund?
Well, not that.
Right.
But the state's got 14 billion in general fund that they're spending. They got money on the books. I'm not talking about the federal money. Okay. I'm talking they got money on the books that they could choose to spend in this way. I think, on issues like that, I like to walk away sometimes with giving, folks a duty. One of the things that might be appropriate for the township to pass a little resolution and say, and we can help you, cite kind of the history of how this thing came to be, and call on the state to address the unfair debt burden that was left with this district that dramatically impacts the fairness and education opportunity for these kids.
Because Willow Run is paying 13% versus
13 mills.
13 mills.
Which is?
Yeah, versus everyone else, which is paying around 7 mills, which to me is very unfair.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing about
And Kirk, you and I discussed this, and I met with Senator Irwin when he was first elected with Brenda Lee McKinney. That's the only thing we asked, is help us with this. It's so unequal and unfair to do it. The school board voted to do it, just so you know, in the very beginning. They voted to raise the Willow Run higher. They did not have to do that, but they voted to do that. And Senator Irwin said that, I said, well, why can't you just do it like you did Detroit and forgive the debtness because of all the factors involved, right? He says, not going to happen.
Well,
And I don't know what that means, and we request to meet with Treasury, there's just like, we won't stop.
Yeah, I mean,
As you know.
there's,
The taxpayers agreed to, when the consolidation took place, it was put before the vote. And the agreement about how that debt was going to be distributed was part of that agreement. So I think part of the problem is, yeah, they need relief. But we also have to understand how we got to that place, because just putting money into a system that didn't work for children isn't going to work either. I mean, I teach there, I'm talking about my teacher, born and raised here. So that's my concern. Yes, we need relief. The idea that it doesn't exist, it exists. The system has decided there's value in the buildings that were former Ypsilanti public school buildings, and they decided there isn't value in the Willow Run part of that. So it's very complicated, and they need relief. But I get frustrated because we're in this place not because of just what was done to us, but because decisions that were made while we're there. And so we have a beautiful middle school, but we decided to put the children in a different building and take resources away from them. I mean, if we looked at the facility plan on the consolidation, part of that agreement was you've got 2 high school places where kids can be growing up with athletics. So why not put them in a place where they at least have a pool in 2 different places? But no, we took them away from that option. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of choices that have been made that are undercut things that are old systemic problems between Willow Run and Ypsi that if people didn't know, like one of the things I appreciate in your conversation here is that you are from here, you understand our community. But if somebody comes in and they have jobs and they don't live here and they didn't come here, they don't understand the undertones that existed between those 2 districts that were going to be hard to mold together if people didn't understand the dynamics that were at play. And so that's my concern. I want relief for the people. But I also don't want people thinking that they can just throw money at a problem without understanding those systemic things that are in place, because we'll be in the same place. When we consolidated, a lot of money was thrown into that district, and we find ourselves in a problem now. And then my biggest fear is all the opportunity areas reside in the area that nobody wants to do anything with. So the open spaces, the demolished buildings, the green spaces are all in the former Willow Run. It's Ypsilanti Community Schools, but it's not being utilized. So are we thinking we're never going to have enrollment go up? Are we thinking, is that our plan right now, that our community will not have a strong school system and we won't have enrollment come up or opportunity? And then we're just going to sell off assets that the community has paid for? I mean, there's a lot that I'm concerned about that particular thing. And I can speak for 36 years of it because I've taught there for 36 years, and I have no problem standing up for my community. I currently teach at home school right now. So when you talk about who our student population is, my children are bused to school. Busing right now, not a good situation because they're bused and riding buses and getting there an hour late. Talk about opportunity not being there. And being bused from locations where the people who are sending their children to us don't have the benefit of a community school in their neighborhood where their housing value is going to go up. Where the schools are located are places where someone should do an audit. Where are the children coming from? Like, why should someone be able to keep a school in their neighborhood if they're unwilling to send their children there, and then that forces every other child to have to be bused in? It's a complicated issue. I want relief, but I want people to fix the systemic problems that are there so that the parents that do send their children to us have what they absolutely should have, period.
Yeah, thank you all, by the way, for 36 years, because it's not been easy. I don't need to tell you that, but thank you. Yeah, certainly just relieving the debt doesn't get it done. That takes care of a taxpayer issue, which I think is important. But on the broader issue of having a school district in our community that can work for our community, we are a long way from home. It is so sad. And it is very complex. Brenda, I think you said, somebody said it's not going to happen. Well,
Oh, we're not going to stop. It's unjust. It's
yeah,
unfair.
exactly.
It's wrong. It's everything.
good for you, because I don't think we can allow it.
Right.
You know, you just can't quit.
No,
I mean,
you won't.
it's, you know, again, I'm old. I go back to Bo. You know, you got two choices, either quit or win. You know, those who stay.
It's just how that happened, and the educational piece is another opportunity that Debbie is 100,000% correct, but the injustice in the taxation, that has to be fixed. We can't get economic development in that area when the taxes are the same amount of mills that they're paying in Ann Arbor. It won't happen, and the biggest challenge we have is to have equity in that, and our seniors are being run out of their home because they can't afford it. So I think, like, we can do a parallel track with the education, but I am not going to stop on the taxation. It just,
Well, I'm very interested, you know, on both sides of it, you know, both the revenue side, the debt side, and the programming, the education side. I'm all in. You know, and it's, most of that stuff, it's not like it's not a client-based activity. It really is because I live here, and I see what these, it's so sad what these kids have to, you know, go through. Kids in the rest of the region, you know, that's the piece that I've asked. One of the reasons that we took it to Civil Rights Commission, we took it to the county and others, because we wanted to shine a light on the region and ask the question, is this really who we are? I mean, we like to think in this region we're pretty progressive, that we're pretty enlightened, but as long as we got this kind of situation with these kids going on in our community in the broader sense, this is who we are.
unacceptable.
I do like to leave with an action step on that. You know, Madam Trustee or whoever, you can't wear me out on this deal. I mean, if you want to get together and let's just start exploring different ways to come at it. I mean, there's always a way home with this stuff. It may take some time, but again, if we I'm very interested. You can't ask me for too much on this.
Kirk, you're action-oriented, and so are we, but to hear people speak words with no action means nothing to us, and nothing to our kids, and nothing to our taxpayers. So we need action steps. And
It's a good moment in time, because this state's got money. And I agree, it's not just about money, but some of the programmatic challenges are financial issues. You know, I watch, you know, again, I give you a lot of credit, 36 years, you know, I look at the compensation structure for faculty across the region. You know, we used to be near the top.
right.
You know, Ypsi schools with Ann Arbor, Ypsi area schools with Ann Arbor schools, but because of what's going on and the challenge of school finance, especially in this area, I know you haven't kept pace with your colleagues across the county. And it's because you're the rare example. Most people, you know, they get the fancy compensation package offered by a neighboring district, and they're gone. And as soon as we get somebody, typically they're gone. It's a problem in faculty, it's a problem with the taxpayers, it's a problem with the kids. It doesn't work on any level. And you get so many people in this area, you know, they'll listen to the speech. Okay, well, what are we going to do about it?
Right. Action.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, well, and we are still working on YCUA infrastructure requests.
Yes, I'm sorry, yep.
And so there's a number of things that Kirk and we discuss weekly on things that we can do to help with the township and trying to get some of our.
Yeah, I didn't mention Evan Pratt. I think he's got a plan to take out a couple dams over on the Willow Run Creek in that area. Yeah, certainly the water infrastructure, this is a primo time.
Well, we just had a sanitary overflow on Snow Road, which is the one I've been talking to everyone about, that we floated bonds on, you know, for $6 million. And, but It did would. We thought it was
You and I
going
have
to
talked a little bit about upstream discharge that we got to pay close attention to. I mean,
Right.
you know, the reality is Ypsilanti Township, Ypsilanti area has been like the Statue of Liberty for forever. You know, it's, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses. Well, it's like there's only so much capacity, so much challenge, so much burden we can carry. You know, and then I think we'll continue always to take tired and poor and huddled masses, but somebody's got to help us out so we can do it.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Kurt.
Yep.
Appreciate it. And I know you wanted to see the Opportunity Index presentation, and that's
Oh,
going to be
yes.
next.
Oh, okay, great. Yep.
Thank you, Kurt.
Perfect segue.
Well,
Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you. And thank Luke. Yeah,
Mask up.
yeah.
So I'm going to give just a little, so first, let me explain what Poverty Solutions is. Oh, sorry. I'm not used to like having to stand still. So my name's Meta Nothaft, and I'm Senior Data and Evaluation Manager at the University of Michigan's Poverty Solutions. Poverty Solutions is a research initiative at the university that partners with nonprofits, state and local government to provide data and evaluation support and technical assistance on issues related to poverty and poverty alleviation. We're also nerdy academics who have our own little pet projects and things that we feel need to be brought to light about economic mobility. So things like auto insurance, water affordability, food insecurity. So we have a broad portfolio, and as a senior data and evaluation manager, I have my fingers in pretty much everyone's pies. And one of which is the Opportunity Index. So the Opportunity Index is a tool so the county approached us and they wanted to develop this index. They wanted to be able to identify and address the high levels of economic disparity and segregation within the county. They wanted to be able to examine the underlying structural issues that drive these disparities, such as housing, education, employment, healthcare, neighborhood stability. And the county wants to use this to make future policy decisions and resource allocation. And personally, seeing their ARPA fund ideas, I got really annoyed, and because they don't seem to be putting their money where their mouth is. So we're actually we're writing some policy briefs promoting use of the Opportunity Index on a few different things. So that's kind of where we are. Next page. So the index is composed of a bunch of, so there's 16 measures across 5 categories. For health, we looked at, so I should back up and say, we gave feedback on the measures, but this was really done in partnership with the county. The county drove most of the decisions on what ended up being in the index. So on health, there's low birth weight, which is kind of an indicator of access to prenatal care and healthcare in general. Health insurance coverage, again, access to healthcare. Life expectancy, which also is a function of access to care, healthy diet and lifestyle, environmental effects on health. Life expectancy kind of wraps up all sorts of things that affect health. And a lot of them are what we call social determinants of health, which are kind of how your environment and your income, where you're socializing, where you're living, impact your health. The next category, broader category, is job access, looking at transportation costs, because if it's not affordable to get to work, it limits your access to jobs. Extreme housing burden. Is your income too low or housing costs too expensive to live close to where there are jobs? Labor force participation rate. Are people working? Are there jobs available? Adult educational attainment. Do adults have the skills to get good jobs? Then we look at economic well-being, child poverty rate. If you have a lot of kids in poverty, they're starting behind the curve. Access to financial institutions, the proximity of to banking allows people to save and have access to their money at low costs. Home ownership, it's an indicator that people have the resources to invest in a home. Home ownership is generally the way that people build assets and serves as a cornerstone of economic advancement. Education and training is very focused on the K through 12 education and training. So preschool attendance, we know that early education levels the playing field for lower income kids, and preschool attendance is kind of a given for higher income kids. Third grade reading proficiency, so ensuring that kids in each community are learning at the same rate as their state peers. It's a measure of quality of schools. The 6-year high school graduation rate, are kids staying engaged in school and graduating? Then lastly, there's community engagement and stability. So how stable are these communities? Vacancy status is often an indicator of neighborhood quality and neighborhood stability. Youth criminal charges, are there eyes on the street? Is there parent and community engagement? And then active voters, do residents pay attention to local issues, engage in community matters? Within the index, all of these are measured at the census tract level. So the index shows all this stuff at a census tract level. And if you're unfamiliar, if you are not a demographer like myself, census tracts are kind of small, relatively permanent. They shift a little bit over time, but they're statistical subdivisions of a county. And boundaries try to follow visual features, but sometimes they follow government boundaries. They always fit neatly within a county. They're designed to be relatively homogeneous with respect to population characteristics, economic status, and living conditions at the time they're established. And the population generally ranges between 1,500 and 8,000 people. So within this index, I'm going to show you a map that has all these little census tracts. And so these census tracts are between 1,500 and 8,000 people. In Washtenaw County, they're closer to, I would say the range is closer to 1,500 to 5,000. You get up to like 8,000 when you're talking about like New York City, Chicago, like more dense cities. So, so how can this index help you? It shows where the areas of concern are within the township and the county. You're going to look at this, and none of it is going to be a surprise to you. These are all things that you know. Just sitting here listening to you, you know everything about what this index shows. But it's important because it helps as a tool to raise these issues up at the county level. There's a lot of groups within the county who are focused on equity within the county. And so having this index as a tool and making sure that people are aware of this tool will help us hold some of these entities accountable. So what does the index have to say? So this is kind of a screenshot of if you go into the index. And so see, we have Ypsilanti Township, and the red areas are very low access to opportunity, and the pink areas are low access to, and then you've got high and then very high. And so if you look at Ypsilanti Township, there's a lot of red and pink and not a lot of blue, and absolutely no dark blue. The tracks that are with the lowest opportunity, not a surprise, they're these ones that mostly are adjacent to the border of the Wayne County border and Ypsi City. These tracks are more urban, older homes and infrastructure. And so these tracks are kind of showing you, like, this is where the county should be directing their resources. Are they? Well, we don't know. Well, are they going to? That's what I think what we need to worry about. So this is what happens when we take all 5 of those categories and put them together. On each of the components, we have, so the next slide, I have just the health components. And so you see some changes in pink and blue and dark, is that like red? I don't know. And we see that not all of the lowest opportunity tracks score as low on these health measures. For low birth weight, there's greater numbers of infants with low birth weight in the red versus the pink. Low birth weight is defined as 2,500 grams or 5.5 pounds, which to me, I'm like, oh, both my children are low birth weight. I must be, what does this say about me? The health insurance, there's fewer people with health insurance, but health insurance has become kind of a squishy measure of access to care because the ACA and Medicaid, Medicaid expansion has given a lot more people access to health care. Researchers are still trying to figure out if access equals getting routine care. And then the low opportunity tracks have lower life expectancy. And I think it's also common knowledge that Ypsilanti Township has multiple tracks with the lowest life expectancy in the county. And so addressing that issue, and that's just, there's a lot of things that go into that life expectancy.
Amanda, did you all look at asthma and heart disease and diabetes as well?
So, yeah, so it's not in the index. They wanted very simple measures. Me and a colleague are writing a brief about this health disparities and difference in life expectancy, and have looked at these rates of chronic disease. And, and it's not just in Ypsilanti Township, it's Ypsilanti City too, where you just see greater levels of COPD, asthma, heart disease, and then, access to dental care, tooth loss, all these different things. And, meanwhile, we have all the hospital systems doing their community needs assessments and saying, oh, look what we've done. And it's like, well, where are you targeting this? And, some of it is they're targeting at their patient population and less so in the community. And so trying to harness some of those resources is the goal of what we're doing. Hopefully we will be doing.
And that data has been pretty consistent for 10 years.
So, look for us in the news a couple of months. We hope to get that out and shout from the rooftops. So the next is job access. They measured transportation cost as the estimated transportation cost for a typical household in the census tract as a percentage of the region's typical household income. So in an area where Car ownership is a must. Transportation costs are very high. When transportation is prohibitively expensive, it limits job access. And in these areas, combined with housing costs, labor force participation, and educational attainment, these things are unavailable. So for housing burden, those red areas are people where there's more people paying 50% or more on housing. You put your head around this. If you're paying 50% of your income on housing, and say you have a child, at the state level, they say childcare costs about 15% of someone who has median state income, which is $54,000 a year. So that takes you up to 65%. And that leaves you 15% or 35% to feed yourself, pay for health care, clothe yourself, put away some savings. If you have high transportation costs and high housing costs, people are really constrained. Labor force participation, it's the proportion of individuals ages 16 to 64 who are currently employed. These are areas with lower labor force participation. And then for adult educational attainment, they just did the proportion of adults who have received an associate's degree or higher. And so these are also areas where the red areas there's lower educational attainment. Again, I don't think any of this is a big surprise to anyone in this room.
I wanted to just comment to note that our lake is blue.
Yeah.
But that's just by
That's a
accident,
lake.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's still no areas of very high access.
Yeah. I think that's more of a nature of statistics and a low number of people, more than anything.
Well, I guess what I'm asking then, I guess it's a question, is that yes, that whole thing right there is our lake. And so it was interesting to me that the last slide you showed and the previous ones before, it just stood out.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true. I think
Yeah.
that it's probably just the color that the map is.
Yeah.
And it's not
This is not
reflective of that.
that suddenly in the middle.
Right.
There's,
Okay, thank you.
so. Okay, and then the next slide, we're looking at economic well-being, access to financial institutions. So these are areas with less access to financial institutions, and the measure that the county chose is this number of brick and mortar banks or credit unions within a 1-mile radius of the center of the census tract. I'm not sure that's a super relevant measure in a lot of ways in terms of just thinking about access to financial institutions. I think things have changed, but it is what it is.
If you don't have a lot of money, why would you need an institution?
Yeah,
Right.
and
Let's just
the
be-
thing is where do they place banks too?
Right.
I'm looking, my sister lives down in Willis. There's no banks by her. What does that say? It doesn't say a whole lot. So, and then we have child poverty rate. So the child poverty rate is flipped so that to fit into the scale correctly. So a higher score for child poverty means that you have less child poverty. So, but it's the proportion of individuals under the age of 18 who are at or above the federal poverty level by census tract. And for a family of 3, that's about $21,000 a year, the federal poverty level. So just to give you a sense of how low that limit is. I talk with my hands a lot, sorry.
So do I. I knock stuff over all the time.
So then there's lower levels of home ownership. The county defined this as the proportion of homeowners among all residential land parcels and compares the rate of homeowners to renters within that area. I personally got pulled in on the Opportunity Index when it was like going to press. I don't think they use the right data because they use county level rental data or the county level parcel data, and there's no multifamily in parcel data. And so it excludes apartment complexes. It skews a lot of things about home ownership. So basically, the economic well-being part of this overall index, I'm not a huge fan of, but I want you to understand like what's going into it, at least.
May I just ask for clarification? On the lower rates of home ownership, if I heard you correctly, you said that that included apartment?
No, it does not, because it doesn't
So that
include.
correlates
Yeah,
with,
it doesn't include any multifamily. So it's homes or single house, and I think homes and duplexes.
so we had
but-
this occur in 2008 and 2009 when the crash
Yeah,
occurred.
and so you've got that is indicated in the data, but there's certain areas of Ypsi, that township, especially along kind of the western edge, that would look very different if you were to look at all rental housing versus.
Do you think that has anything to do with this, the Mishta and Washtenaw County having such high income? So when you're doing Mishta projects or vouchers or whatnot, I mean, you can get $1,300 for a little bitty house in Ypsi Township.
Yeah.
But you can't afford to get one in other areas of the county, so
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of, I have a lot of issues with the lack of multifamily housing in the county.
But
especially on-
multifamily's not in this number.
Yeah, I'm going to say, like, so that, this, in
Maybe
terms of, this is like about home ownership on this level.
No, but
It's-
a lot
but
of
the
them are
Mishta-
renters.
But, yeah, I mean, it's not so much, what you're talking about is a supply issue. Like, there's more rental housing, single-family houses for rent in Ypsilanti Township that are affordable, but that's because housing values are lower and there's,
Yeah.
so
Well, I would like
it's like,
yeah.
it's like, there's a lot of components to that.
There's also a concentration of poverty through Mishta and
Yeah.
through the housing commissions,
Yeah.
which we don't have one.
Yeah.
So I think there's some policies that need to be reviewed, but we can take
So-
a deeper dive into that.
Yeah.
This is really making me upset again.
So we've got education and training. The lower opportunity tracks have fewer 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled in preschool. The proportion, lower rate of third grade reading proficiency, which I imagine is just getting worse during COVID, and lower rates of high school graduation within a 6-year window, which is kind of, the state considers graduating on time if you do it within 6 years. And you see, again, it's these where you really see an overlap of the low opportunity. You see it really clearly in the education and training. And so it points to the importance of investing in education. And I think it's a big reflection of what has happened to the public schools in general in Michigan, and especially within your community. I moved away from Michigan 25, 30 years ago when we had really good public schools, and then I came back and discovered that we no longer have very good public schools. It was a huge surprise because, I grew up in Heartland. We had good schools, but I was still taking math at the University of Michigan as a high school student because we didn't have AP and things like that. And to see that so many of there's so many communities within the state that do not look much different. Like they had made all this traction, and then in the past 20 years, look like they did in the early 80s. And it's heartbreaking for me. So then the last one, I think here, is the community engagement and stability. We have the vacancy rate. So this data comes from HUD, and it's a proportion of residential properties that are vacant for 36 months or longer. Again, these red areas, these are the places where you've got the vacant houses. You've got kind of what real estate developers call, missing teeth on a block. Juvenile crime, there's higher rates of youth crime, and there's a lower proportion of active voters as defined by the proportion of registered voters who voted in the 2018 midterm. And they use the midterm because people are more, like if you're a gung-ho voter, you're going to get out for the midterm.
So I'm the clerk, so I have to, then that skews your data, right?
Yeah.
If you're not a gung-ho voter, and then also if you consider, now that I know what community engagement, points are, if you have vacant homes for longer than 36, of course your voter rate's going to be low, right?
Well, no, it's registered voters.
Oh, but
so
right,
if you
you're
have
not gonna be
vacant
registered in a
properties, you
vacant
don't
home.
have. If you have vacant properties, you don't have voters registered.
Sure.
So.
And then, Amanda, the only last thing I wanted to say, just so I don't talk again anymore tonight, but I just wanted to say, it's disheartening to me a little bit. I understand why, but this gray square here, I just have to mention it because it is zoned industrial in our township, but there are people who live there. So it just makes sense to me that if you were to
So the problem, the gray area is that there's just not enough people for
how
any
does
of
that
these measures.
sound?
Yeah.
Right? And if you drive over there, and
Uh-huh.
if you see those homes and those residents, I'll tell you what color they are, you know? And
it's
and so
exactly.
anyways, I just had to share
Yeah,
that, and I know
so-
it's not you, but thank you for listening.
No problem. I'm on your side. I would not have shown up if I didn't want to help you guys. So you all know what I'm going to talk about, but when we met with you guys this summer, I went back and I was looking at some of this data, and I really think focusing on where you were and what you've become is a really good way to think about some of this. Because it really helps to identify some of the structural causes and barriers that have happened over the year to interventions. And I think it eliminates some of the trope of this low opportunity is just an intractable problem. It's always been this way, and it's always going to be this way. And that is just not the truth when you look at this data. So start here. Changes in income. So we have the most distressed tracks. I'll try to remember to stand close to, I'm just not good at this, standing still. So if you look, the Washtenaw overall and the most distressed tracks had median incomes that were really close to each other in 1970. And you see the median income for the county overall has stayed fairly stable, while Ypsilanti Township and the most distressed, these very low opportunity tracts, have just fallen consistently. Then we look, is this driven by, trends in education? We have more dropout. No, actually, we have fewer dropout than we did in 1970. And it's been a consistent downward trend. What we see is, and there's a increasing percentage of people with some college. So this isn't just about education. One of the big things is that, you look at this change, okay, you can go on to the next one, sorry. I was ready for you to go to the next one. This percentage of population employed in manufacturing. And you can see the gradual closing of all the industry around Willow Run. And, I think this chart right here is like, okay, this is where the story is. We've lost industry, and so it's had a cascading effect. And so the closing has, it's gone from these tracks used to be, have great opportunity, and the job loss has had just a devastating impact. And it's reflected not just in income and poverty, but also if we look at house values. Here, let's do poverty real quick. I think the poverty, this was also something I was like, wow. So in 1970, the lighter color and then the darker color, the lighter color is 100 below the federal poverty line. The darker is between 100 and 150% of the poverty line, which is also kind of, we consider that struggling. So, this would be making, if you're a family of three, making $30,000 a year, that's, I think people will say that that's not quite enough. And so again, you see very similar to what you saw in the income is, the most distressed tracts were actually lower than the county. And then it just kind of creeps up. While the county stays, it increases a little, but it's much, we have the big jump between, 1970 and 1980, but then it's, it's pretty stable. So what has this done to house values? House values, the most distressed tracts in Ypsilanti Township, house values have fallen. Well, in the township overall, they've risen, and in the county overall, they've risen a lot. And some of this is driven by the housing market in Ann Arbor. Whenever you have like the county overall, that's getting thrown in there. And then home ownership, instead of using the parcel data from the county, I used census data on home ownership. And you see that the home ownership in the most distressed tracts has fallen just ridiculously, from like a high of close to 80% down to below 50%. And so, again, this is the, how do people build assets? It's through home ownership. That's the pathway to middle class. And so, it's this cycle that has happened. Urban planners talk about kind of a cycle of neighborhood. You have a stable neighborhood, people are employed, people start losing jobs they can't afford, or they age out of their homes. The neighborhood there's disinvestment in the neighborhood because people's incomes have fallen, so businesses aren't coming in. So then businesses aren't coming in, so housing values fall. As housing values fall, the people who move in have lower and lower incomes. The neighborhood becomes, and a higher proportion of these houses end up getting rented, and that destabilizes the neighborhood. And it has just this cascading effect on the neighborhoods. And so I feel like this, kind of looking at this history along with the Opportunity Index, is much more powerful because I think you just looking at the opportunity index, it's, the county can say, well, you have these problems, you've had these problems, and they're continuing to put things, and, your township has, bears a disproportionate burden of things in terms of, your schools, there's, the dealing with people, basically displaced workers, and the sort of investments that you need to make to offset that. They needed to be made, 30 years ago, but where are you now, and what can you do to move yourself back to where you were? We know why, looking at this, we know why things were better in the 70s and 80s. So how do you reverse that trend? And so you guys have, ARPA money coming. And so I think kind of leaning into this history and the opportunity index can help you guide some of your ARPA spending decisions. There's also infrastructure money that can be used on, water, sewer, which making those sorts of investments will also bring business in. So it has this thing. I think one of the two huge things that the ARPA money has is education and training money. So it has money for learning loss, to address learning loss, and to re-engage high schoolers who may have left the schools. And so, targeted tutoring, which can have just a much bigger impact on educational outcomes than investing more money in, overall school infrastructure. So there's seems like a ton of money for education. There's also money in the ARPA funds to train young adults and older adults who were working in service industries that were impacted by, most impacted by COVID. And there's money for healthcare. And one of the things that, the county has this mobile clinic that was delivered, I want to say in 2020, maybe 2021. I'm for a statistician, I'm horrible with numbers. But it's underfunded. They're not using it. And so they have this very expensive resource that they're not using it. And so the hope is that the county will be using their resources for this mobile clinic, but the township also can, if you can partner with, to use some of this on healthcare to help with some of the, social determinants of health issues. And then, I think some of the challenge for you is, you have areas of the township that are doing well, new subdivisions coming in, new people coming in, and so you're going to have this, I feel like there's, this push-pull between, using the money on the low opportunity tracks, targeting that funding versus, the township as a whole. I think, whenever there's money on the table, everyone wants some, even if they, there's just a lot of selfishness. So, I see that as a challenge for you guys, but I think I think the opportunity index and looking at the history, gives you a lot of power to say we need to fix some of this because it's good for the township overall.
Amanda?
Yeah? So do you guys have questions?
I just have a couple of statements, maybe.
And I also want to apologize for the technical issues.
Oh, no, we loved it.
I normally,
Honey, it's our day. This is how we roll. Don't worry about it.
I normally travel with my tech support, but he's at home studying for his chemistry exams.
So are you familiar with the 2015 report that was done by Washtenaw County?
Yes.
And are you familiar with the things that they recommended for 48197 and 48198 specifically?
Yeah.
We increased the education level.
Yeah.
We increased the income level, and we raised the poverty rates. I mean, that's what they specifically asked. And they said, I'll never forget this one sentence that said, if you get to 30% poverty in a neighborhood census tract, it is the point of no return. Exact words.
Yeah.
I'm
That's-
like, we got to do
okay.
something, right? So
Yeah.
we've been working, partnering, trying to get assistance for the economic tsunami that hit us.
Yeah.
And that's what it was.
I mean,
Not only did we have, we lost our schools, we lost industry, the General Motors
Yes.
plant, June of 2019, I'll never forget it.
Yep.
They announced it. There's $1 million of revenue.
Yeah. And
We had $1.8 billion worth of taxable value. We went down to $1.1 billion of tax. So when you lose that kind of revenue,
yeah.
just because of Headley and all that, it's very hard to get up to that. We're still not up to 2008 numbers on our taxable value. We also had the highest foreclosures in the county.
Yeah.
And we,
It's,
because.
you lose jobs, it's
No, we had the
foreclosures
highest
and-
foreclosures because we had the highest building permits too.
Oh.
So we had the greatest growth.
Okay.
And then when they, that scam that the banks were doing and qualifying people, and then they foreclosed on them, that is when a lot of the more mature neighborhoods that's been here a long time were scooped up for $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 for a home.
Yeah.
And then they got hooked up with the funding from housing commissions, from Mr. And the concentration of poverty grew since 2009. And those, and we have to lift our people up and our community up. But if you continue to layer weight on us, it's an impossible task.
And you're doing it with, this reorganization of the schools and the loss of
Right.
educational funding. So,
So
I
it's-
find like those educational measures that are really focused on, this is K through 12 education. These low opportunity tracks have these really, they're doing poorly on all these K through 12 measures.
This is nothing new to the county. This is
But
nothing
this
new.
is, this
So we
is,
gotta-
they need, like, the county and,
So when you talk about ARPA funds, which I didn't know you were
Yeah.
going to get in that discussion, but of course, if you look at our history as well, you'll
Yeah.
see that Ypsilanti Township, this board and previous boards have invested dollars in, I hate even saying lower opportunity. It's such a negative
Yeah.
connotation.
But-
I wish, we could use different words, but right now that's all we have.
I've been calling them the most
It
distressed
kind of puts a
tracks.
stigma, and
Yeah.
I hate it,
It's
to be
like,
honest.
I think they're like, these are distress tracks. These are not areas that have always been low opportunity.
Right.
These are tracks that have taken a hit and they're distressed. And
Also, in 2009, when the foreclosures occurred, what Ypsilanti Township did in assessing, we made the market values fair and true. A lot of communities did not do that. We did that because it wasn't fair to taxpayers. And the assessor, we had a new assessor at that time, and you have to make it based on the sales in the neighborhood.
yeah, and in Detroit, the overassessing has just like.
We don't
it
have
was-
overassessment.
Yeah,
here.
it was, that was like a second,
Tsunami.
chink in the armor on
But what
the
we
foreclosure.
did is we literally lowered the values of
Yeah.
homes to match with the market sales. And they do it every year. They'll do an analysis on it. So the assessing department did
Yeah.
that. And so that too has to come back up.
And that also lowers your
So there's a
revenue.
lot of
So
layers, and I think that what I'm very concerned about is the concentration of poverty in our county. We're the 8th most segregated county in the United States of America.
yeah,
Like, no one says that enough,
yeah,
and no one is doing anything about it. It was your report, Poverty Solutions that highlighted that, and we're so grateful for that. But now we need action steps to do something. You don't have to worry about us investing in opportunity.
Like
You don't have to ever worry about that.
Yeah, if you guys need, technical assistance on any of this, I mean, we can do analysis of like how many people will be impacted and what things look like in a much more micro level.
So we've been going door to door, handing out masks and test kits to our people who've been affected the greatest by COVID.
Yeah.
And if ARPA funds are for the people, number one, who've been affected, it's not broadband, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's people who've been affected by COVID.
Don't talk to me about broadband.
Okay.
I'm like, why are we investing in broadband?
Right, so
On the
I mean,
western side of the
let's focus on the opportunity index, right? And let's
Yeah.
focus on COVID. And that's
exactly.
so going door to door, and I've been elected 34 years. And the poverty is so great.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of needs. And the county gets a lot of funding for a lot of these needs, just their structure alone. Public health is one of the first defenses is county health.
and
It's not local health,
yeah.
but we invest anyways. Like we allocated $900,000 out of ARPA funds for masks and test kits. And we're taking them to the people because when they have the pop-ups and they have the drive-throughs, our residents were saying they don't get on the computer and check, and by the time they get there, they're out. And although I do think it helps a lot and I appreciate it, that we need to take stuff to the people, like you said.
Yeah, and I mean, you see it, there's the farm at St. Joe's, and you can get, a farm share for free. And you go to St. Joe's and you pick up this box of produce, but you've got to get to St. Joe's. You've got to be able to transport this big box of produce back, and you have to get there at a certain day and time. This isn't how you make fruit and vegetable accessible to poor people.
Anyone that
You
can't
take a
get
bus
there.
and you go into the neighborhood.
So we're trying to change it, and I'm sorry, this is probably one of the most passionate issues that I have, is addressing the poverty
Yeah,
in our county.
and
If we're going to focus, like climate change is their next big investment at the county level. We need to change the climate of our people. That's what we need to change.
I mean,
I believe in climate change. I mean, I want to do that, but as far as priorities.
I believe in climate change, but I really wish the city of Ann Arbor would stop building bike lanes and just fix the damn roads.
Well, I think we're on the same page.
Yeah, so, I mean, I fear that I'm going to become one of those crazy people who run for office like you guys. But no, I mean, I think you guys have a lot of challenges, and I'm hoping, there are moments when I feel like, is the county really using this? And we put a lot of work into building this for them, a lot of staff time, and we really want it to be used. I know you do. And so hopefully, we just make enough noise and it'll happen. Does anyone else have questions?
I just want to express appreciation for you giving the presentation and the detail. There's such a hurry for people to spend money, and I've said from the seat, all the hurry does is keep the money going the same places it's been.
Yeah.
And so, as we have immense pressure on us to get started I want the residents to know one of the reasons why we're being careful is because we don't want to spend money in ways that are going to keep the systems that are in place. And even to say masks and test kits, if we look at what people said, they've said our areas have been taken care of. When we go door to door, that is not what we're finding. We are being greeted at the door by people who are saying, first of all, with almost tears in their eyes, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. And I didn't know there was an event. I don't use the computer. I'm not able to do that. I went to the event. They were all out. So we're not trying to go slow because we don't want people to have things. We're going slow because we want the money to go where it could help people. And if that's frustrating people, it doesn't mean that we don't care, but
It's the best
the money that's
strategy.
been spent quickly, if you look at the map, if the money that's been spent quickly, it went blue.
Yeah.
It didn't go red.
Yeah.
And so that's the most frustrating thing. So the more we can learn, thank you.
Yes.
Your offer to say, hey, if we have questions, the ability to do that is important. But
Yeah.
again, I don't know where I was told, some presentation that I was in was School for Equity. When things go quickly, speed keeps inequities in place.
Yeah.
Because what's going to get supported is where the power structure is at that time. If you start to slow things down, that's when you start to say, oh, okay, is that where it was spent? So thank you very much. You've given us a lot of information and at least the offer to say we could help. And you've given us a chance to look at things differently than, I went to the presentation when it was initially shared with everybody. But the idea that it was just presented and then it's not being used
And,
feels very unconscionable to me because it's supposed to help people. And if it's not used, it's not going to have that intended outcome.
And I think there's a lot of then COVID hit and this happened. Yes, but now we're getting our legs underneath us. There's federal money coming in for both infrastructure and ARPA. The CARES Act money, it had to go out the door quickly. That was federally mandated. But the ARPA money, we really have time to stop and reflect. Some of the agencies don't even have firm guidance out. In the 2021 federal budget, there was money for low-income water assistance program. HHS still hasn't distributed the money to anyone. Some of this money is coming out of the federal government really, really slowly. And it gives you guys time to think about and to, do some deeper analysis about where you want to spend it and where it's best to target it. And I think, you're taking the right approach.
Thank you, Amanda. We're going to have to take a short break before our 7 o'clock, and we enjoyed you, and thank you so much for your attendance. Hopefully we can have you back.
I brought Poverty Solutions swag for you guys.
Awesome.
I was walking out of the office, and my colleague Trevor, who is just lovely, was like, oh, the impact reports came today. Bring them. So I have a bunch of impact reports.
Thank you.
Lisa, thank you so much, Anita.
So if it's all right with everyone, we're going to take a short break.
Okay.